This episode of the Troxel Podcast is made possible with support from ArchIT. Are you tired of standard IT services that miss the mark? Choose ArchIT for specialized, proactive IT management, BIM support, and robust data security tailored for architects. Whether you're a team of 10 or a growing firm of 50 plus, ArchIT understands the architecture industry and will empower your unique creative vision to enable you to do your best work. Embrace a technology team that enhances, not hinders, your design process. Visit getarchit.com for your free IT assessment and start transforming your firm and your tech experience today. That's getarchit.com. Welcome to the Troxel Podcast. I'm Evan Troxel. Phil Reed is back on today's show to share his insights from his unique career at the intersection of architecture and technology, which has spanned his history with Autodesk, his role in reshaping digital practice through Revit and Enscape, and his leadership in fostering collaborative innovation through events like the AEC Acoustics Unconferences. Today's conversation, which was once again recorded live and in person with Phil in the United Lounge at the Denver airport, just like we did last year, dives into leveraging AI for meaningful work, the importance of curiosity and play in professional development, building personas for better communication and storytelling, rethinking architectural documentation workflows, the evolving role of BIM managers, integrating empathy into design processes, the transformative power of constraints, and how AI is reshaping client engagement, education, and personal creativity in architecture. Recording this in person with Phil reminded me of our first discussions back in episodes 145 and 146, which I've linked to in the show notes if you want to catch up and hear Phil's fascinating story in AEC Tech. And before we get into today's conversation, I would very much appreciate your support of this podcast if it's one of your favorites, by subscribing wherever you watch or listen, and please leave a review either on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. You can also support the mission by becoming a paid member at trxl.co. Just click the join button in the lower right-hand corner. And if you'd like to receive emails when episodes are published with all of the links and other information as they come out, sign up for that by becoming either a free or paid member at trxl.co. This was a great conversation with Phil, and I've got a bunch of follow-up links in the show notes to hold you over until the next episode of the podcast comes out, which will start up again in January of 2025. So be sure to check those out. They are in your podcast app if you're a paid member, or if you're a free member, you can find them at trxl.co. So now, without further ado, I bring you my wide-ranging conversation with the one and only Phil Reed to close out the Troxel Podcast for 2024.
There's a podcast, there's a Tesla guy in Singapore, and I have a habit of, if I watch a documentary or see something interesting on YouTube, or I'll just try to connect with that person on LinkedIn.
Uh-huh.
And I connected and then said, yeah, I'm interested. I'll be coming to Singapore and happy to buy a lunch, would like to learn about what you do. Well, he ended up putting a podcast together, and it's out on YouTube somewhere.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nice. So you've been on a podcast before?
Yes. Before yours. I'm sorry. And but he talked about the cars, and then we talked about investing in Tesla and why I thought it was a good investment. And then we went out and met the president of the Tesla Club in Singapore. It's not a very big place. You could drive around the island in about an hour. But he had severely modified his car with electric openers, and his screen would swivel and all this kind of stuff. And they had prepared light shows, and it was great.
Nice.
Yeah, so, yes.
My son bought Tesla stock, and it's up $200 a share from when he bought it.
Yeah.
He's pretty thrilled.
Yep.
He's like, he bought 10 shares or something. He's very happy.
Perfect.
Yep.
And when I bought, the Model Y, and I've never had a new car. We bought a new minivan, I think around 2004. But never had a new car, bought a new Model Y Performance. And it's, when you buy a used car, you just pay for it. So I never had a car payment.
Right.
And so I thought, nope, the car is going to devalue. but the stock might go up. So I took the money that I would have paid for the car in cash and just put it into Tesla stock. And that was in around the middle of April, which just was fortuitous. And I think it's because of the ecosystem that they have. It's not just it's not a car. It's an iPad with wheels.
Yeah.
And so that ecosystem as we were chatting before, instead of hiring just a bunch of developers to try to figure out full self-driving, he's effectively crowdsourced full self-driving with how people behave when they drive.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a pretty interesting ecosystem. So the car that you don't drive, probably talked about this last time, the TV you don't watch, the phone you don't answer, those are usually orders of magnitude very successful technologies. We started, I think.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Little did we know.
We're back where we were last time.
That's right. Yeah.
Tell people.
Yeah. Where are we?
Gate 44, Concourse B, Denver.
Denver Airport. That's right.
Yeah, but this way we get breakfast and lunch and we get to chat about all kinds of things.
In person.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In person.
Well, thank you for that.
That's an important part of it. Otherwise, it feels transactional or something.
So you talked about that in terms of leverage, right? And I just think that's kind of interesting when you put that in the context of our industry too, right? Like looking for places where there's opportunities to use that leverage that were maybe unforeseen. Or do you think that was all planned out in advance, this whole idea of crowdsourcing training and then being able to use that to help build this infrastructure that really has to me, like the analogy I think of is like the overnight 10-year-long success, right? It's like the overnight success that actually took.
Oh, it looks obvious
10 years.
now.
Yeah, right. And it's like, well, no, it wasn't obvious back then. It was a bet, and it paid off. But there's lots of bets that didn't pay off too.
No, the idea that in the future we'll just use everybody to program our technologies, like that just sounds too.
That's absurd. That's an absurd idea, right?
But in a way, that's what they did. They built the infrastructure that trained the system. So the infrastructure in terms of physical electrification, you got to be able to charge. So I think that's why they've been successful. And yesterday was GM's announcement that they're going to get out of the commercial automation driving business. So Tesla stock has shot up a bit more today, right? It's like $415 a share. And I think in April it was $450 a share. But I don't think it's because he's making cars. I think it's because they're creating an ecosystem for people that don't want to or don't have to drive.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's the sum of the parts. So they've crowdsourced behavior of how people behave when they drive and in edge conditions of weird turning constraints. And like right now, 13.2 is out and I don't have it yet, but apparently you don't have to put the car into drive and then start full self-driving. You put in your destination and select go, and it'll back itself out of a parking lot or out of a constrained parking space, and then it will start to go where it wants to go. And I found it, even on short trips from Charlotte to the coast, enormously relaxing to let the car do its thing.
But it took a while for you to get there, right?
Yeah,
like it just didn't start out like that.
No, it's like getting a teenager to drive and you're trying to trust them.
Right there with you.
You don't want to fall asleep and you're just like every time there's another car, you're kind of ready to take over.
I feel so weird not having a parking brake in the middle of the car that we're using for driver's training, like that my parents had when I was a kid. It was like they could just rip that thing up at any moment because they don't have their own set of pedals on their side.
Right.
They can grab the wheel. But now with the push button park brake, it's like, I'm not just going to push that button when we're full driving, right? And so like that level of trust, you have to build up to that.
It's so smooth now. Early on, like in December with the system that they had, when it would go around a corner, sometimes it would hesitate and it wasn't smooth. It was a little, it was like a teenager, like an experienced teenager. It was like turn straight, turn straight, turn straight.
Overcorrect.
Yeah, overcorrect. But now it got so good and there's different modes under self-driving. There's like a hurry mode, a regular mode, and a chill mode.
Okay.
Because the acceleration, even in regular mode, I find too aggressive. So if a teenager was driving chill and you go, whoa, slow down. When the light turns green, you don't have to be right off the line. It's okay.
Deactivate 4 cylinders.
So it's in chill mode, but it still accelerates in a very confident fashion. I'm at the point where if I was doing a trip where you might actually sleep and confidently, get on the road, put your seat back a little bit, like getting on the plane today, right? I'm flying in from Charlotte, took off and pulled my hat over my eyes, leaned the seat back and went to sleep for 45 minutes. But in a car, you just, sometimes you're driving, you're not paying attention.
Yeah. Never. Yeah.
Right. And that's
All the
scary
time.
when you get naughty and your eyes are kind of dropping,
man.
your head's dropping down. You're like, I should just pull over. I think in this case, it'll be better than having a teenager drive, and you'll be confident and you'll just kind of put your seat back for 5-10 minutes and then wake up.
So you're seeing the future, like you can already see where this is going, right? The next steps are.
I mean, that's where I think it's going to go. It's just, that's what people will enjoy.
Yeah.
Like when we were talking before about the time it takes to travel somewhere, there's really no competition, at least in the US, with air travel for, let's say, 500-mile distances. You just got to get, the trains aren't, maybe in the Northeast corridor, they're predictable enough. But
do they even go to the location you want to go to?
no, it's not point to point,
Yeah.
right? So when you get there, you still have to get in
Right.
so you're 2 hours before the airport. But I think with driving that's confident, one of the constraints, and I was chatting with Brock Howe, actually we were texting, as I was flying, we were texting back and forth over the internet in the plane. Brock's in Athens, Georgia. And one of the constraints of private vehicles is they take up so much space because of the distance you have to maintain when you're driving on the highway, right? You're sort of 100 feet between cars. What is it? 10 car lengths or something
Yeah.
like that. You're going 60, 70 miles an hour. But not in NASCAR. In NASCAR, they drive nose to tail at 200 miles an hour. And I could see if you could get into a convoy mode, like full self-driving, that's the next step. And you push
Travel in packs.
and you travel in, nose to tail, 3 feet apart, and they're all communicating with each other. And that special lane goes 100 plus miles an hour. Well, that starts to compete with air travel and trains, and it's point to point. Because I tell you, it's so quiet. And I have conference calls in the car, self-driving's on, and I'm paying attention to the road, but I'm also paying attention to the conversation. It's very relaxing. So yeah, I think I think that it's not the car. It's not a car. I keep referring to it as an iPad with wheels. It's it's not a car. I don't know what to call it yet. Well, maybe it's an automobile. We've always called them automobiles, but they weren't auto.
Yeah.
Well, that's right. Rich people have always, and we talked about that before, very wealthy people have always had these kinds of things. The car that drives itself, but it was a chauffeur, or the person that wrote things down for you, which was the stenographer or the scribe,
Mm-hmm.
Or the
your entertainment was the gesture, right?
Yeah, and the king that would have the advisor. And now this is coming down to common people, down to a common person.
Democratization, yeah.
Oh, in an extraordinary way.
Right.
Like I wouldn't feel comfortable personally driving at 100 miles an hour.
You would gain that comfort over time. It might be
over time.
Might be kind of
but
fun.
Things happen fast.
They do.
And I went fast once in the Tesla for the first time to pass a car, and it was just one lane in each direction. But I made the mistake of doing what I would normally do in a regular car, which is mash the gas and then indicate and get in the other, get in the passing lane and then pull back over. But when I went to pull over in the passing lane, I almost went off the road because it was happening. So things were happening so fast.
Vector, yeah, like physics. Just
it's not the 0 to
road.
60. That's fast. It's the 40 to 100. It's the same 3 seconds. And so you have to learn to go slow. And in a regular aspirated car.
Go easy, yeah.
Yeah, because things happen so quickly.
Mm.
But these kinds of tools that the very wealthy have had, like the kinds of things that kings have had, let's say in the last 1,000, 2,000 years. The Roman emperor didn't drive his own chariot.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
He had somebody drive his chariot. Now it's coming down to, I think, common people. And we were talking about AI before in terms of being conversational, or the car that drives itself, or I think certainly in transportation, in personal transportation, the idea of getting in a car, getting up early, relaxing. You don't have to be at the airport and fight elbows in traffic. You get in the car and you drink your coffee and you open the newspaper, or you open the internet on your phone, you start reading the day's news, and the car's doing it itself. I'd feel very comfortable. I've been in cars where I was with Christian Lang, who is the former CEO of Enscape, and we were in Germany, and we were driving to the airport and on the Autobahn, and he was confidently driving well over 100 miles an hour. He has an electric Porsche. I felt completely relaxed. So if I could have that kind of confidence in a personal vehicle, okay, 100. It's not the speed; it's the abrupt starts and stops that'll hurt you.
Right. Momentum kills.
That's right.
When you stop it too quickly.
That's right. So if it was confident and you're in and you've overcome the artifact of having to have the separation because of the speed, because you're driving
Make
manually.
those adjustments.
No, it's making the adjustments and cars are 5 feet apart and they're communicating to each other. Then you could travel very quickly from point to point. But taking that into what we were talking about in AI is I know it's an over discussed, at least in architecture, right? You can't open LinkedIn without seeing another rendering tool that's some kind of AI tool. But it's not been that lately. Lately, it's the most trivial things. You're asking it questions that normally if you had a very learned person next to you in the car and you'd ask a question, well, tell me about this. And it would give you all this information. Right. In the latest iOS, it will answer your initial question with Siri, and then it will go, would you like me to answer that with what is it, Chat GPT? Now it stopped, or in the early versions, it would call it Chat GPT, but they've gotten rid of that. It's like, would you like me to answer that with
Before
chat?
Full release, that's a good idea.
Yeah, so I'm driving back from the coast yesterday, and I came through a small town that all of a sudden had these artifacts of, at one time in history, it was a very affluent location, but it was in the middle of nowhere. So I just said, hey, Siri, tell me about this town. And it went into this long soliloquy about the history of this town and when it was established in the early 1700s. And it was like in the moment knowledge that.
It was like your own personal tour guide. Like when you rent, you go to Alcatraz and you get the headset and you go to the stops and it tells you as you're there, just in time, kind of an idea of.
Yeah, while the idea is
access
current.
to information while you're looking at it, not, oh, I'm going to go look that up later. I better put a bookmark on this or save it to my notes. So
I need to go
look
look that up in a library. So that's where I think I've kind of been interested in the AI piece here and there, but mostly it seems to be automating bad processes or it's automating inefficiency. This next generation seems to just be giving you orders of magnitude more useful information with very little input. So there's some tools out there that would automate documentation with AI. Like here's my document set, tag and dimension things. And I think that's kind of an example of automating inefficiency because otherwise you have to have somebody do it. So one of the things we were talking about before was schedules. Okay, so Revit will continually count things as you work, but you have to create this schedule and you have to order the fields and there's a lot of curation that goes into that.
Oh, the coordination is insane, right? But to really do it right.
It coordinates it, but you have to set it up so it
still need an expert though to review it and actually coordinate the hinges and the lock sets and the door schedule is one thing. Openings, locations, right? What kind of door goes? Is it a 1 hour door? Whatever those things are, 90-minute, right? Does it have fire glass in it? But then there's like the whole hardware end of things, and it's a dedicated consultant typically for that kind of a thing. So I tell the story about what you did with Grok that kind of led to that discussion.
Yeah, what led to it. So Brock Howard and I, Brock and Grok, Brock's texting me and I'm on this airplane and I thought, well, this is kind of an obscure thing, but, and it's on Twitter. I took a photo at this beach show that was this week in South Carolina of one of the vendors, and they had a table full of preserved alligator heads and alligator jerky. It was like one of the things they're trying to sell to beach shops, right? So, and I took a photo and I thought, I wonder if Grok would know what this is. So I asked Grok to estimate the retail cost of everything in the photo. And I'm on the internet in a plane. And in about 5 seconds, it started giving me responses and estimate, like counting things, quantifying things. I was just dumbstruck by that. Like that's a very common question and it cost me nothing to get an answer. Well, I suppose I subscribe to whatever premium X or something like that. So
that it's basic. You experienced like a magic moment right there. It's like, what? It can do that? Because that then leads back to this door schedule example, right?
Well, yeah. What if we're not making schedules? Like that was the leap of going from that was, okay, wait a minute. I've got a set of drawings and I'm going to submit a set of drawings to AI and say, could you just give me a bill of materials and pricing from Home Depot for everything in this project? Like you don't even have to make schedules for that.
No, you just send it an image or a series of images or a model. It would be amazing if you can actually have a fully tagged BIM model.
And that's a whole leapfrog to me. That's the part that, and on the way here this morning, as you kind of have time to ideate, you're just sitting on a plane doing nothing. But the idea that you could take a photo of a chair And I actually did this last week in Wilmington. I was going through a tour of a distillery. They had cool leather furniture. I took a photo of one of the chairs, and using a Google image search, it said, oh, here's the chair. Here's how much it costs. And you can buy it at Home Depot. And it's like, what? Home Depot doesn't sell this furniture. Well, they sell lots of things that you can't buy in the store.
Not in their quote unquote showroom.
No,
right?
no.
But they're online.
But normally the step would be, oh, we're going to start a company to build a tool that connects your Revit file with Lowe's or Home Depot, and then
with your pro account, right?
Yeah, and then you're going to buy this thing. So it's gone to a price point of almost zero, and no one's built a tool in between it. It's not like they built the manual version certainly there, but they didn't build a better manual version, and now it's been usurped by some other agent AI. It's just leapfrog. It just went straight there. And so for me, that's kind of like a really important and interesting inflection point. It's trivial. And you were talking about having a conversation.
Yeah. So I was at AU. On my way back from AU, I rented a car, and my first stop was at a photo shoot for a architectural project that my friend was the designer of, and the photographer was there, and we had seen each other recently, but not that recently. And he said, "Have you ever had a conversation with ChatGPT?" I'm like, "Well, I've asked it questions."
Yeah, I never knew you did.
So question and answer, is that what you mean? And he's like, "No." Like he goes, on the way down here, which is about an hour and a half drive, he said, "I had a full-on conversation with ChatGPT." And he said, it blew my mind. He said, "You have to try it." And I had an hour-long drive coming up to Palm Springs from there. And so in the car, rental car, through CarPlay, I fired up, and I think you have to have a Plus account for ChatGPT to do this. It's $20 a month.
Okay.
So you get the advanced voice mode that they teased, months ago. It finally came out. It took a while for it to finally come out, but now that it's out, it is very conversational, and it will interrupt you, and you can interrupt it, and it will, if you get disconnected along the way, when you get a signal back again, it'll say, "Looks like we got disconnected. Let's pick up where we left off." So it just maintains continuity with this conversation. And I was throwing this idea at it, and I had just been tumbling this idea around in my own head, not really coming to any conclusions, but I thought, oh, I'll try this out with it. And so I asked it I told it what I was thinking about doing, and it was very excited about this idea. But it says, let's explore this.
Right.
And I said, okay, well, where should we start? And it said, well, let's start with, and then it basically took me through this whole process, and it asked me questions that everybody who's thinking about pursuing an idea it would come across your plate. All of these questions would, but in the span of 45 minutes, it sparked ideas that would not have been sparked otherwise, because I didn't do this with a person. I think this could lead us to other interesting places in the conversation.
Could you have a conversation with another person and the agent? Do you think that would work with two people?
That's a good question. I would think so. I don't see why not.
And does it give you responses in audio?
Audio and real time, yeah.
We should do another one of these where it's running.
A full podcast.
Yeah.
That would be interesting. We would probably want a quieter location to do that.
I didn't think about that this morning when I woke up.
Right.
Let's do a podcast with an agent.
With an agent, yeah. So it asked me questions, and it forced me to think about things. And you don't even feel confident in your answer, right? Because it's spur of the moment. It's just whatever is there you have to work with. And of course, you could say, let me think about that for a little bit and I'll get back to you. I assume you could do that. But I tried to just stay in the moment, and I tried to do the best I could with what it was asking of me.
Was it hard to be present when you were having this conversation? Or?
No, it was a normal conversation. It would be like...
You didn't have to suspend disbelief. You're just like...
It would be like being on this podcast. And I went into it with the expectation that it was going to blow my mind, right? Because my friend had kind of prompted me with that. And I thought, okay, I'm here for this. And so I did that, and I didn't think twice about it. I just thought, there were several times where I thought, oh, this answer's going to suck, but I'm going to say it anyway. And it forced me to think through things, I'll say. And then at the end, I said, okay, now can you give me a summary of this conversation and give me some action items to pursue next? And it said, yep. And it said, anytime you want to come back and pursue this conversation further, I'm here and ready for that. Right. And because of the way ChatGPT works, right, it's got every query that you've asked it is a separate entry. And so you can go back and pick up on any one of those threads and continue it on. And this is no different. This is just one of those threads. And so they're each in their own little buckets. And so you really could have as many of these different threads, and they're not really going to cross-pollinate with each other.
Right.
Maybe you wanted to.
This is not like a Google image. This is not like a Google search from 20 years ago.
Not at all.
And I've only started playing with this probably since the fall retreat, because I realized I was using the private version of the Apple beta, and then it was getting too squirrely. I went back and dropped back to the public beta and realized that you could upload images and ask questions. And I don't know if it was somebody at the Leadership Retreat, or maybe, I think it was Craig Barbieri, took a photo and then asked, it was how to create a text prompt. So sometimes you can create a text prompt by, okay, how do I describe this thing in my head? Or if you take a photo of something, ask it to describe the material, and then use that material as a text prompt, and then say, okay, I want a seamless texture from that description. Works better than taking the photograph and trying to massage it in Photoshop so it looks like a seamless texture. So I was like, you can submit a photo and ask it to describe it. So I took a photo of the kitchen at the cottage and asked it to describe the design as, sort of pro and con terms. And I got a description, sort of a modern kitchen design. And then I asked it to describe the design and the persona of Steve Jobs. And it said some nice things about the design and the utility of it and the clean lines. But then it also said there was nothing really innovative about it. It's like
personality.
So I sent it to a friend of mine who's a contractor. He was an architect turned contractor. And he's like, oh my gosh, I would hate for this to happen, to review my design work. And he sent me a photo of a mountain house that he'd worked on in North Carolina. And it was fully dressed out, end of project, and the table had a very colorful and sort of festive place settings on it. I guess they had set everything up and then taken photos of the finished mountain house. And I submitted the picture to ChatGPT and asked for a pro and con of the design, and the pros would come in the persona of Martha Stewart, and the cons would come in the persona of Steve Jobs. And boy, did Steve Jobs savage the design. And I sent it.
So Martha was complimentary.
Oh, Martha thought the colors and the place settings was lovely and complimentary to the rustic, and then Steve Jobs was like, busy, busy, busy. This is terrible. How much noise, clutter. Yeah. So I sent it to an architectural friend of mine in Charlotte. And he said, man, this would have been great in architecture school to be able to take photos of your design and then ask for feedback of the design, without waiting until a Monday morning crit, but getting kind of experienced feedback from personas. And then it's not like a Google search. It's not transactional. It's interactive.
Right.
And I think this is going to have profound implications around healthcare. Certainly, I think in terms of psychology of someone who's going through grief or a difficult time, to be able to have a conversation. And certainly in psychology, there's a broad range of quote unquote right answers. I like a psychologist author named Viktor Frankl. If you want to look up a book called Man's Search for Meaning, he was a psychologist and ended up not fleeing Germany when he could have before the war, and then ended up in Auschwitz and survived, and then wrote about what kept him wanting to live. And then later on, he created a style of counseling called logotherapy. So I have sort of an affection to that style of I don't know what you call it, psychologist. Mm-hmm. So to be able to have a conversation in the moment when you're troubled by something, but you want the responses to be in the persona of Viktor Frankl or St. Augustine.
Or within the context of their kind of
because that's
their framework.
That's if you could really talk to him now. I think in a simplification, you're talking to a carbon-based version of AI. That's Viktor Frankl. Well, he's passed. You can't, and he certainly doesn't scale. Viktor, if he were alive, he could talk to one person at a time for 55 minutes, and so imagine any modern day psychologist that you would have an affinity for. What would this person say about this particular issue? Or I would like to talk to a persona of this person. And because history is certainly full of philosophers, to be able to talk about a modern stressful issue with the persona of Marcus Aurelius in context with his meditations, like, to me, that's profound. And you can still talk to other people.
Yeah.
But how it's going to impact.
But you might have to wait, like you said, until next Wednesday.
Yeah, next Thursday.
2,
and it's $300 an hour. And,
right.
Yep. And I think generally speaking, men don't like to talk about, we like to solve problems. And so we tend not to talk about the things that are troubling us because they're unsolvable in the moment.
Yeah.
There's not one right answer. So being able to talk to someone or something in a way that it's reflective, it's in the moment, so it's very needs-based, and the price point is zero.
So how do you think this impacts, it sounds stupid to even say, how does this impact AEC? Like, so one of the things that I do want to bring it back to that context for the podcast, but at the same time, it's...
Is it too constrained?
It sounds trite. It just sounds like, oh, really? We're going to talk about this. But the ideas are that you're talking about schedules, right? You're talking about mundane stuff that we're still like literally showing up to fight with every single day, and getting wrong, and making a lot of mistakes. And I think about how long it took to even transition from drafts people to CAD managers to BIM managers or technicians. And now, like, to me, it seems like, well, BIM managers is old, like that's tired. What's wired, right? AI managers. Like, why don't firms why aren't they, like, you're seeing, going back to the Tesla example, like, you see the future, you can taste it, right? It's right there. And it's so
I'm
obvious
so ready to
to
sleep
you.
in the car.
It's so obvious that this is going to happen in some time frame that you can't not expect it to happen. And yet, I mean, the same thing goes for a lot of things, right? In AEC and in tech. And we are so slow to adopt this stuff, right?
I think some of it is, so a lot of times working with customers or just other people, you don't know, there's so many good ways to do things. There's so many products of function as you design. Like you can say the stairs can't go here because of a functional reason, but there's so many great places to put the stairs. But the customer is going to have a particular affinity towards how things are arranged. And I think one of the areas that's not been explored with regard to AI is the idea of this client's persona, of using your client's persona as you're designing in the moment to kind of reflect and interact with the design with some confidence that when you do meet every other week, you're going to be on a vector that's correct. And there's a couple of tools, they don't create client personas, but they create potentially customer or employee personas. And I mentioned it to you before, it's called Humantic AI, and it plugs into Twitter, and it plugs into the same subscription plugs into Twitter, and it plugs into LinkedIn, and it will scrape someone's profile, and based on their LinkedIn profile, it will give you a vector based upon how they will respond if you're trying to sell them something or if you're trying to employ them. So basically, you're trying to convince them to change their behavior or to behave in a certain way, right? I want you to spend money, and so I've used that with great success, Humantic AI. Now, the bigger step of talking with a persona to critique or to give feedback or to have a conversation in the moment about a certain design direction that you could go. It's how many times have we worked for a couple of weeks and you have to come up with options.
2 steps forward, 1 step back.
Yeah. And then you meet with the customer and you have to change direction again, or there's,
or
you want to work with
or
confidence, and the customer can't meet with you every afternoon. It's their time is constrained.
Or maybe they want to and you can't.
So, and the persona could be not just, one customer, but say you're designing a residence for an entire family. How will the family respond to this? Yeah. You're going to get how much will it cost and what does it look like? Those kinds of impacts to AI, I think, will be profound. Like just being able to interact with a persona of someone with some confidence. Try it sometime. Take a photo of a space and ask it to describe the space and critique the space in the persona of someone alive or dead. And I don't know if the answers are completely correct, but they seem to be on vector. And it's just curious. If I gave you an assignment and said,
entertaining, if nothing else. Yeah.
Evan, write a description of this space and critique it as if you were Martha Stewart.
It's a fun thought experiment. For sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
And so that part of it, I think from an education standpoint, from a business standpoint, being able to interact with a persona, a client's persona, or even if you knew the people that were going to be on a jury and you could take all of their personas and then
you create a feedback loop that's totally proactive, right? Because you're not waiting for that event to actually happen. And you might go in there in a better position. I would hope you would go into it.
I wonder if architecture firms employ psychologists to try to predict how the jury is going to respond to a design. Certainly it happens in the legal space where you try to predict how jury members, right, when they're going through the process of selecting jury members, they employ psychologists to try to pick the jurors that will have an affinity towards their approach to the case. Do we do that in art? I don't know any architecture firms that employ psychologists.
The example I can think of is employing psychologists to use research as a foundation for why they make decisions the way that they do. You know, when it comes to like healthcare space design, uses of color theory in design, things like that, where they do have psychological effects on healing, for example, right? So, and then they can point at their researcher and say, like, this is our expert, this is our subject matter expert, and here's why we're making these decisions like this, and here's why you should go along with it or choose us, even as an example. So they do things like that, but I don't think in the way that you're talking about it, not that I know of.
Yeah, like create personas of everyone that's going to be on the jury, and what subtle sociological, psychological, philosophical.
You're making a business case, right? You're talking about winning work.
To understand the customer.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. So check out Humantic AI and then use it on yourself. I think the free version, you could do a couple of test runs, and then it's like trivially expensive. It's not expensive at all.
So you did that? You did that on yourself? And
if someone was trying to sell something to me, or if they were trying to employ me, and some of the edge conditions around employment were whether or not the person if they would respond to a job opening that was aspirational and ill-defined, or did they need to have very specific definitions with what would be the metrics for their success in the job. And some people you can say, hey, just come on board. It's going to be great. We'll figure it out. We don't know what we're going to do. You're going to help us figure it out. And that's very aspirational. And some people they will have an affinity to that ambiguity, and others will run, screaming the other direction.
So it's then in your approach to talk to them, knowing what ways will connect with them. You can modify your approach to meet them where they're going to.
Yeah, it said one of the things that stuck out was if you're trying to sell to this type of personality, don't go into story mode. Deal with facts and figures and how their competition is using it to get ahead, and they'll want to know data. And even it will tell you in sort of if you're sales pitching to someone, don't expect a decision. That person's not going to make a decision. They're going to have to go back to their company and build consensus. It'll be a long sales cycle. And it's scraping this from their LinkedIn profile.
So let's go back to the leadership retreat and your roundtables.
You went to it. How was it?
Well, before we talk about what it was like,
what did you do?
We did that already on the podcast when Adam and you were here. But here's what I want to talk about. We talked about BIM managers they're really technically oriented, right? Not just BIM managers, but people on the tech side of architecture being really technically oriented, maybe not used to leading teams, right?
Right.
And that's a big transition. That's a huge threshold, of change for a lot of people.
You're dealing with emotions instead of facts,
right? But then plugging this context in with this humanized tool that you're talking about, right? And knowing your audience, right? Because this is about communication style and approach to get the desired outcome that you're looking for. So there's a
Right.
business case for that. But there's also, to me, this is about like internal projects as it is about winning outside work. Or
Right.
you are innovating in your firm, or you're coming up with a new workflow, or you want to make a different tool purchase. I want to give people tools
Right.
to think, or different ways to think about these kinds of tools that you're talking about, because I think there's a personal aspect to this too, that it can be leveraged for to communicate in the right style that it will land with the person who is your audience to move this goal forward, right? I think that there's something there.
So it's not uncommon for BIM managers, self-included, to live in the potential and to be inside that bubble
Right.
a lot. And
Right.
technology is so obviously advantageous to us. Oh, we should spend money to do this thing, but you have to convince higher ups. And one of the more recent conversations I had with a technology director, almost out of the blue, can I talk to you about something? And yes, pick up the phone and we're chatting, and they're completely frustrated. They want to do this certain thing. And his question was, how do I convince my boss that I'm right? Jesus, what an open-ended question. And, well, what are you trying to do? Have you run the numbers? Have you figured out that the cost of the technology is trivial, but now you're going to have to train people and you're going to have to change behavior? And what if it doesn't work out? And I'm trying to go through the conversation. I said, have you offered to resign if this doesn't work out? And they're like,
What
no, why
lengths
would I
are you
do
willing
that?
to go to?
Why would I do
Are you
that?
willing
It's
to
like, 'cause
die
you're
on
going to
the
cost
sword?
the company a lot of money. And if it doesn't work out, what's your trajectory? Like I think the problem is, I think what I mentioned to this person, I said, you haven't built trust. They trust you to manage the technology, but not to manage the business. For a BIM manager who's, I think we're also a little bit all on spectrum, to have a conversation with ChatGPT and go, hey, I'm trying to talk to my director about doing this thing, and they're just not listening to me. I wouldn't spend $300 an hour with a psychologist to this. I might buy lunch or breakfast for someone and go, how would you manage this?
Yeah. Well, and I would ask you, and you would come back with your experience, right? But at the same time, like you're saying that this thing exists where you can
They're on the way to the
this.
office, 30-minute drive in traffic, frustrated because they were just told yesterday, no, we're not going to do that.
Right.
And so you want to vent. You just want to know why. And having something go, oh, have you thought about this? Have you thought about this other thing? It's not even a tool that helps you design better buildings. It's just a tool to help you deal with
or whatever problems or challenges
it's dealing with people.
Yeah.
The emotions of that. Because I think we get locked in our heads. This is the right way to do it. Like
there's that, and everybody's like me, and we speak my language, but it really to me is about speaking their language and finding the way to communicate best with them. And I love this idea of the persona and kind of prototyping these conversations ahead of time. Role playing is what we're talking about, right? So
even before you have that meeting with the boss and go, look,
right.
I've got to have this conversation. I want to invest this money into doing this thing and training these people. What are the roadblocks? What are the likely objections?
Or grill me. Pre-grill me, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, Steve Jobs roasting the design, right? It makes me think of like, you grill me with questions. I want to get this thing through all the red tape that I have to get it through.
Does this ChatGPT that you're using, does it work with video, or is it?
You can put images up there.
Okay,
I don't know
images.
that it'll work with video.
You can't walk around a design model or something like that and ask it to interact. I think it could prepare you. And we have a family friend, Harvard trained psychologist. And a couple of years ago, we were having a chat about, obviously he does counseling. And I said, I think the AI is going to have a profound impact on this. And he's like, oh no, you can never replace people. And now I look at it like the father that's going to have a difficult conversation with a son, grades at school or anything.
Yeah.
It's like, how do I want to approach this to build a bridge, to not sever a relationship, any difficult conversation, whether it's the boss at work, a partner, a child. The thing that I was thinking about when you mentioned that it's being conversational, and can you have a third person as the agent? Man, if I could have gone through teenagers and had the agent in there so that
mediator.
Yeah, it's the mediator. Okay, Dad, you need to be quiet now. You're talking too much.
You're talking too much.
Right. I could have Viktor
You need to
Frankl in
listen
there
now.
listening in. I think those kinds of conversations will be profound, and not just in monetary terms, but just in like human relationship terms, because we see things through our own biases.
When was built North America in St. Louis? What year was that? 2018 or 2019? 2017?
That was the next to the last one, so I think it was 18, because 19 was Seattle.
Seattle, right. I think it was I did like one of those YouTube wrap-up videos. I was doing those at the time, and something that came up at that conference was, what if you had, I think it was in was it the DTS, which was like the pre-conference for the Digital Technology Summit.
Yep.
And, Rob Yorey and Robert Manna and people like that were there. It was a group discussion with people from large firms all over the U.S. would come in and be there for a few days before the actual Built conference, and then stay through the Built conference. But one of the things that came up at that was, what if you had one of those Echo Dots or something on your desk at work? What would you ask it? And I think you mentioned, like, there are certain things that I just wouldn't feel comfortable talking about it in public, right? But this whole idea of using it, you've got your AirPods now. Like, I don't even think those were a thing back then, at least, the wireless ones, and you go on a walk. You go out of the office and go on a walk, or you're in the car on your drive home or to work, and you're having these conversations. There may be things that it's fine to do in the office at your desk, right? And to prompt something and have this conversation going with what it's seeing on your screen. I think Claude recently, their latest model, Sonnet, can look at your screen and interact with you as you're interacting with your screen. And now there's this new layer of interaction with these models. But there's voice, there's screen. So maybe there are a lot of things that you could do that you'd be fine with saying out loud or showing on your screen at work.
Right.
And then there's a lot of things that aren't, right? And it's interesting that you kind of tied that back into psychology, and like, especially men who are not as open with their emotions and their feelings and expressing those or talking to others about them.
Or you pay somebody $300 an hour
and just not doing that because it's cost prohibitive.
No, if you're stressed about money, you can't pay someone $300.
And I think like working in an architectural office leads to a lot of situations where that would be extremely beneficial, right? So like, it's a frustrating job. It's a challenging job. And that's in lots of different roles in the office, not just technology roles. But I mean, we can definitely see that in technology roles. It's really challenging.
Yeah, I think, we've used AI in the AEC space primarily to create beautifully seductive images of buildings, and the lighting is perfect. The reflections are amazing. And, from text prompts and a little bit of graphics, little massing or sketching.
Some kind of rudimentary underlay.
Images. But that's just, I think we're just scratching the surface. We're doing the thing that appeals to us as,
it's the eye candy, right?
We're visual people. We've kept ourselves alive over millennia by being visual and listening, but that's just scratching the surface. It's far more profound.
Well, and that even, scratching the surface, to me, it's like, it's the lure, it's the carrot, and it's not even the thing we should be really focused on, right? It's a distraction.
Well, there's an enormity of execution that has to take place. If you're talking about in terms of manufacturing and leverage, I think everything in a way is every job is kind of a manufacturing role. You're turning something of a lower value into a higher value. So you're turning raw materials into tennis shoes or tires. You're turning electricity into drawings, instructions to build a building. And we are still doing. So there's a lot of automation that occurs and has developed in the last 20, 25 years, where you can move a door in a plan and it moves in the elevation and it moves in the schedule.
It's called building information modeling.
Right.
Phil, have you heard of it?
But that's transactional.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a conversation where you're just staring at the blank piece of paper and going, this doesn't really work. Like, give me some ideas here. Which normally you'd call someone over who has a lot of experience.
You would say, "Hey, I need some fresh eyes on this. Can you look?
Yeah.
Can you look at this and tell me if I'm
crazy?" And you lay down some
crazy?"
trace and
Right.
you kind of look at it a different way.
Yeah.
I think that kind of interaction is what's going to be really profound. At school, at university, like having a minor in psychology and a master's degree in architecture, or maybe having an undergraduate degree in architecture and a master's degree in psychology. Because ultimately I think what we're trying to do in business is persuade.
Absolutely.
And how you persuade depends on the person that you're trying to persuade. It's not one.
There's no one
approach.
way to do it.
No.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. There's so many ways to do things. And what will appeal based on that person's understanding of how that space is going to be used, commercial space or a private space, the aspiration of what that building and investment is how it's going to perform. Like being able to interact with a persona at that level, I think is just, it's profound. We don't have.
So you feel like that's leverage to build those skills.
Well, if you're building a firm
because those
now,
are
you don't
extremely
have
valuable skills.
You're not constrained by team size.
Yeah.
Maybe, I don't know if I like things in threes. A stool a stool won't wobble with 3 legs. Maybe you just have 3 people. What's the firm size now? And you have these intelligent agents that you can interact with, even with those other people on the team. But how you will pursue work, propose work, win work, execute work, bill for work. These are tasks that people have to manually do. And to be honest, they're not always interesting all the time. Like chasing money is not interesting to some.
Well, you become a specialist in that.
Right.
This is how large firms operate, right? You're specialists in all those roles.
I think these agents will be the specialists that you need on demand.
Or they can be if people are willing to leverage them.
Look, even the conversation when the customer's not paying you, having a conversation first about this customer that's not paying me, how would you approach that?
Well, you would write your draft.
And some customers are going to be very transactional, and you're going to say, I'm going to come and I need to be paid today. And others it may be a different appeal.
A negotiation.
Yeah.
Right.
Because if you're impatient and you just escalate right away, get frustrated, go, okay, look, well, if I have to get a lawyer, I will.
If you're a hammer, every problem looks like a nail.
That's not the win.
Right.
So using these kind of agent feedback loops, having the conversation before the conversation, I think that's the profound part. We haven't touched the surface of that yet. We're just using it to make pictures right now. We're not using it to create personas.
I mean, and the technology exists right now to do this.
You'll get more than you. That was the bit flip, is when you get more than out of it than you think you put into it. Like taking a photo from that beach retail show of a vendor's tabletop and going, okay, what do I have in this picture and how much would it cost retail? And it starts to give a very detailed accounting of everything on the table, to the point that, the alligator heads were pretty obvious. You could get back scratchers and alligator heads, right? But then it had alligator jerky, and it recognized alligator jerky from this photo at probably 10, 15 feet away. And it gave me an accounting of what that would probably cost retail terms. Like, this is the most obscure thing. Like, no one would build a tool for this.
Oh, and by the way, the table cost you $25 too.
Yeah. So now I'm finding myself walking around taking photos of things and asking Grok, who makes this chair and how much does it cost? Where's this light from? And it goes and finds it.
So the thing that this is bringing up for me is this whole idea of curiosity, right? Like, you obviously have this curiosity now. Like, you've seen a bit of what it can do. And now, oh man, I'm just going to keep asking it more and more questions. But curiosity is, let's just say it's not really welcome in a lot of corporate situations, right? It's like, do the job with these tools like this.
Oh, I don't know. Why would you ever want to work somewhere you weren't being paid to be curious?
Well, and look what you can get out of it, right? Like look what the potential is with that. And that there's a leverage right there. Like, I always found it to be incredibly frustrating to work in places where it was like, this is how we do it. This is how we've always done it. This is how we're going to continue to do it. Don't go outside of these lines, right? Don't color outside the lines. And I remember first year of architecture school, my professor, who was a wild and crazy individual, he said the worst thing you ever learned was in kindergarten when they taught you to color inside the lines.
Inside the lines.
But stifling that curiosity happens early on in a lot of people, right? And then it continues. And so like there's levels of curiosity that are allowed in air quotes, right?
Yeah, and I suspect that business success leads to pattern recognition of, let's do more of that.
Oh yeah.
Right.
That
so you
works.
don't want to be
Keep
curious.
doing that.
Yeah. Even to the detriment of the business. They'll follow it all the way down.
Yeah.
But just keep doing the thing. And particularly in stress mode, then people really look at pattern recognition and they don't want to try anything else.
Double down.
They're stressed.
Right.
Yeah, they double down.
Right.
For architectural firms now, or students that are in school now, I suppose if your aspiration is to work for a company and be part of the milieu of a very recognizable high design firm, then that's one track. But you don't have to follow that path. Like having all of these agents work for you and to be able to ask it questions on demand when the question is forefront. The cost of that, if you had to do it in human terms, would be you would have to hire all of these people to do all of these kinds of tasks for you. I don't know if you're not curious. I don't know that I would want to employ people that were not curious or want to be employed. Isn't that kind of what we're not just paid to do a thing, we're paid to pay attention to the thing we're doing and to try to improve the thing?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know isn't everything improvable? So while you're doing it, you're also in this other mind of going, I wonder if this could be improved.
I wish we could run a poll on the podcast right now, right? Like a real-time poll of like, do you feel like you have that agency in your role to be curious? Like a lot of times there's like designated individuals who are like in an R&D kind of a situation, and that might be over glamorized, right? But it's like this, or I remember as a designer, right? I remember a project manager who was, a principal and owner in the firm who's like, you've got the easy job. You get to design things. And I'm like, are you serious? Like I get to put my heart up on the wall and watch people rip it off the wall.
Right.
Right. It's not what you think it is. And so anyway, I tangent, the idea of this R&D, those people get paid to be curious, or I think there's paid
time
to come
for
up with
it.
innovation.
I can see the director going, okay, I like your idea, but that's not a good idea for today.
Yeah.
Like that's a good idea for the next project. But to just say, hey, I don't want you to stop thinking,
Yeah, just do.
Oh,
crushing for an artist or for an architect.
I don't even think it's artist and architect. I think
or
anyone, like even if you dig a
people who
hole
like
and someone
solving
goes,
problems.
is the hole there? Nah, let's put the hole over there. Or if you're digging a hole, right? Like literally digging a ditch and you go, we're going to dig it this way, but that's a long way. We could dig it over this way and it's a better way to dig the ditch. Oh, I'm glad you thought of that.
Yeah.
Like, to be proud of your work, anything, be curious, anything. I can't think of what you could do that you wouldn't be curious.
So the idea behind this kind of talking to this technology, talking to these agents, why not just talk to a person about this stuff? And the answer is because they're not available.
You can, but they're not always available.
Right.
Yeah. No, there's very smart
or
people.
Or they cost money or whatever those things are.
No, sometimes they're in the middle of their thought and now you're interrupting an important moment for them. I don't think it'll be either or.
Yeah.
I think it'll be both and. You'll use this other... You mentioned that the agent was so optimistic about your idea, right?
Yeah,
you do get that artifact sometimes. What a wonderful idea.
Oh, yeah.
Let's think about that. But you do need a way to bounce ideas. I think these tools, at least in my experience, are not being used to do lazy things. You're doing them to be more rigorous about them, to be curious, to be asked questions, to be responded to in
run
ways.
things to the ground faster, right? Like
it's like, I didn't think about that.
Yeah.
I was doing one of the posts for the fall leadership retreat, or maybe it's a spring roundtable. Like we don't have alcohol at the event. And so I wanted to do a short article about why we don't have alcohol. And it wasn't meant, I don't want to do anything preachy. It's just like in practical terms. So I asked ChatGPT, like, give me some practical reasons. We have this kind of event. Here's what we're trying to do. What are some practical reasons give me 5 practical reasons you wouldn't have alcohol? And out of those 5, I got 3 good ones. I think I ended up combining 2 into 1. I was like, oh, these are good reasons. You know, they're nothing to do with moral authority. It's just like, okay, we have water sports and we have ski boats and e-foils. And yeah, you don't want to risk people drinking and being, you have involved in water sports. So. We saw them on the river, but none in the lake. So yeah, there's, to be thoughtful, to be in the moment, to be aware of what you're saying and thinking. Okay, those are good reasons why we don't have alcohol. It just avoids complexity. I still had to kind of curate the final selection, but I asked the tool, like a room full of people, hey, give me some ideas. Like you're just ideating. And I think that part of the creation process.
Don't you do that anyway? Don't you go through it everything, even if you make it, right?
You do, but sometimes, there's that mental block at first. You're just trying to get
absolutely,
a vector.
Yeah.
And it's very good at getting that initial vector.
Yeah.
And then giving you ideas that you wouldn't have thought of. I think even for myself, if I had got myself in a quiet place and thought about it, I wouldn't have thought about that angle.
Yeah.
Yep. So those kinds of, I would encourage someone to take some of these tools and take a photo of a chair and say, where can I get this chair? Take a photo of a space and say, I like this design. How much would this cost? All the furnishings in this space, what would they cost? Like it will recognize brands of tables and chairs and soft furnishings and wall fixtures. It will recognize all of that and give you a list. So it takes us a lot of time to design to get to the point where the customer might say, I don't like it. But if we can do that quicker and have these quicker iterative steps and we're confident that we're on vector, I think the clients will be happier. The customer will be more satisfied with the end product.
As an architect, I always found that you have different types of clients, but the best clients were the ones who were looking for ideas, searching for ideas.
They're using you as an AI.
Yeah, they were using you to do the same thing, right? Because they're not the experts and they recognize that and they hired you to do that job and you're the expert in that job. And for you to look at it like that, I think is a good take, right? Because like when you get those unexpected, whoa, I didn't think about that.
Right.
That's really...
Yeah, they've already biased themselves. They've flipped online through pictures. They've looked at designs and they're still at the point where they go, I don't know, just here's what I like, but can you give me some ideas? We have this piece of property. Here's what we want to do with it. Here's how we want the end product to perform. Here's its function, but give me some ideas.
One of my favorite kind of surveys afterward with a client was when I said, so, let's just talk about the overall process. And they said, what I really, 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 the thing that really made a mark for me, and this was like a board member at this organization. And they said, you brought things to the table that we would have never, ever, ever thought of.
You're a very good carbon-based AI.
But
that's what you wanted, something unexpected.
Those are the kind of jobs I want to work on.
Right.
And I don't want to work on the kinds of jobs where it's like, I have all the answers, number one. I want it to be interactive, but I also want it to go somewhere where neither one of us thought it would go.
That's what happens in the conversation so many times. I think I have an idea and I chat with Adam about the idea. And at the end of the conversation, we end up with another idea that neither of us anticipated that we're both interested in. And I think that's another important artifact of having these conversations as opposed to the transactions, when you can re-ask the question and, okay, why do you say that? And dig deeper. You end
what
up
do you
with,
mean by that?
Yeah, you end up with an idea that turns into a very interesting opportunity. It's surprising.
Yeah. And there's something here about surprise that actually makes people pay attention to something. It's like what something is impactful to you, it's typically because it was surprising. So it's the twist in the movie. It's the bridge in the song. It's the key change. It's something that you didn't see coming, right? And it's like, boom, it smacks you in the face, right? And that's what makes its mark on you.
Right.
Yeah. Searching for that to happen.
And the restrictions of don't just do anything. You have to, and I think that's where AI suffers right now, particularly with regard to trying to come up with design ideas and creating renderings. It's really good at creating anything, and it's hard at creating something. I think that'll get better, but it's hard to iterate and have things sit still and then just kind of tweak it over here. I only recently found out that Keith Richards uses open tuning and 5 strings.
Yeah.
oh my gosh, the music sounds amazing. And
Right.
I
Nobody
realized,
nobody would know that, right?
and he said when they were starting out, like the heavy string, the
I
bottom
mean,
string
just
is
listening.
expensive.
When I say that, nobody listening would know, like, oh, Keith Richards plays with a completely modified setup from normal guitar
So it's
players.
an old blues style,
Right.
open tuning, so you can strum the strings without touching the strings. It also means you can just put one finger across 5 strings
And get a chord.
and get a chord.
Yeah.
Go online and listen to Keith Richards playing the guitar, and you're like,
It's magic.
that's the sound.
Yeah.
That's the sound of his guitar playing and how he's able to create fills. The songs that they're known for would not have been possible without that, without the restriction of that tuning style. And I think he said it was an artifact of, you can do open tuning with 6 strings,
Yeah.
but they were broke and the bottom string's expensive. So he's like, yeah, forget it. We'll just play without that one. And
But yeah, it's like,
and
it's
even
like-
a guitar
it's like
company
an art.
created a 5-string guitar, which he played with for a number of years in the late 70s or 80s. But it was a 5-string guitar and he would open tune it.
just for him. I mean,
And
but then
listen to them
anybody could buy
play
it.
carefully. The concert in, it's called Shine a Light. It was a documentary film. Martin Scorsese filmed it in the, it's at the Beacon Theater in New York. And if you listen to Keith playing, there's a lot of fumbling. Like there's a whole bunch of other musicians playing at the same time. He's just doing fills and little pieces, but it's amazing. It's like orchestrated music. There's these little pieces of magic happening. I don't know that it's a completely recognizable sound once you hear it. And it was the product of restriction and function.
Yeah. That is the beauty of constraints in any situation, right? It's like you figure out how to operate within them, and then you break a
And
rule
break the
here
rules.
or there, right? Yeah.
Yep.
But they actually provide you with, you keep saying the word vector, right? But that's what it is.
Well, it's just like you're on
It's
a-
like, okay, now I can see where we're going because it's not just a wide open field of
Right.
blank page.
Yeah. Here's your
What do we have to
restrictions.
work with?
I only have one professor at architecture school that built this artificial restriction. This is a 4-hour task. This is an 8-hour task.
Oh, yeah. You talked about
Yeah,
him,
Nelson
I think,
Benzik.
in one of our podcasts. Yeah.
Yeah. And he's like, yeah, I don't want
This
you
is
working
how much
all
time you
weekend.
get to do this.
You get 8 hours. And if you come up with 2 ideas in 8 hours, fine. 1 idea in 8 hours. I want to see what you get by tomorrow morning. Give me 4 hours and then go do something else. And I always felt a certain level of satisfaction of doing something well with a constraint as
Mhm.
opposed to just, it doesn't matter, do anything.
Or just you still have time left. Keep going.
I know.
Even though you feel done.
you feel burnt out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There are definitely people who are wired. If there's more time, we're not done. We can do more.
The glue's got time to dry. Keep gluing.
Right.
So it's I think the technologies are interesting, certainly in the ability to interact in a conversational way with an agent that will critique a design for a student, for a would-be architectural student. It will discuss ideas in a way that aren't emotionally threatening, right? Because you're not in front of a jury of peers. Your students are all there watching you get reamed on a Monday morning. You're having conversations with a tool that looks at a design and goes, well, have you thought about this or have you thought about that? Or certainly from this persona, it's a wonderful design, but the other persona might say, oh no, it's too busy. What were you thinking?
So this idea of curiosity, but also flexing that muscle and actually playing, like I like to frame it under the play, right? You play with these things so that you learn what works, what doesn't work, how it's changing over time. If you don't flex that muscle, if you don't flex any muscle, they atrophy, they go away.
Well, you mentioned that some of these tools will respond to things on your screen.
Yeah. Claude.
And it will respond in architectural terms. I mean, could you have
That's a
a
good
model or a plan of a?
I believe so. Yeah. And so the company is Anthropic and their model is called Claude, and they have different versions of Claude for different, different structures and stuff. But one of the modes of their app will look at your screen. So
I would look at a mode that does the thing that when you go, could I have another set of eyes? And they take out the trace and lay it over and start doing
You're
sketching.
right.
But this mode lays
this'll
digital
actually-
trace on your screen and
No.
goes, well, have you thought
Well,
about what if you move this over here, move that over here?
It's looking at what you're doing on your screen. So I think the idea is like it will actually act like an agent on your behalf at some point. Maybe it does that now, but it's like I'm clicking this button in this interface, it means this, right? And it could walk you through things. It could be like a helper, but it could also potentially, I think, do things for you.
I think there's a lot of empathy that occurs in good design where you're in that mode of sort of plan view, but you're, analytically, but you're also trying to imagine how it will be experienced.
Yeah.
And getting feedback in terms of the emotional quality of a design, as well as does it satisfy the analytic needs of the design?
Yeah.
And in stress mode and time constraints of real life, just being able to have that other person there that's always available just to ask a question.
Yeah.
I think it will take the stress away of doing work and then having to untangle it later and going, oh, I spent all day yesterday on that. So I worked 16 hours and I have to roll it backwards, as opposed to in the moment being able to.
Well, there's that, but there's also how much you can actually compress time. And so you don't waste as much time having to redo something, right? Because ideas like, okay, so real-time rendering, you're connected with Enscape. I love the idea of using it as rendering as a decision-making tool now, right? That wasn't a thing back in the day. Back in the day, it was a
you
final
push your
output.
button and wait. Yeah, it was a thing you did at the end.
And you better not screw it up because you don't want to have to do it again, right?
Right.
And we learned how to fix things in Photoshop because it was way faster, right?
Yeah, instead of push the button and wait 4 hours again.
So this idea of like moving that technology closer to the metal, right? It's like, I'm now using it to make decisions because of the visualization quality. I can use it, right, as a tool throughout the process. And I think this is kind of the same thing, right? This is another thing where we're using it as a tool along the way to help us.
It's in the moment.
Yes.
Right? It's not the thing where you push the button at the end and render.
Right.
It's the questions and interaction in the moment. Otherwise, it's too disruptive. You have to do these big cycles where you go back and start over and go back and start over.
Right.
So that's where I'm kind of, there's so much about AI this and AI that. And I was like, it's getting overwhelmed with AI. But recently finding these sort of conversational vectors, that's got me really interested in it, in the impact of not just in business, but just in trivial things. It's faster to ask AI to give me a recipe for fajitas or burritos than it is to try to find it online now. Because when you search online, and I've started doing this with recipes.
Everything's a 5-star recipe, first of all.
Well,
like
and you have to go through, you get the thing,
filter.
and then you get the backstory of the thing, and then you got to scroll past the ads.
Yeah.
And finally, at the end, you get the recipe, and then you get the instructions. But if you ask ChatGPT to do
no nonsense.
It's like, oh, you want to make fajitas? Here's your list of ingredients.
Totally.
Here's what you do. And it's like, okay. And these are options. If you want to do this, you might do that. And I'm like, okay, that's what I want and there's no advertisers. There's no noise. I'm not scrolling down 4 pages.
Right. That's a really interesting door for me to get back into this part where, this idea of using or leveraging curiosity of your employees to play with these tools and create fluency with them so that leverage can be amplified, right? Like if you have zero fluency with these, then someday you're going to say, oh, we should be using these tools, right? They've finally proven themselves. Now, okay, we're the laggard end of the adoption curve. We're going to now jump in on this, right? And you're late. You're super late. You can't leverage it as much. Now you're playing catch up. And so with your clients, with people that you're talking to out there, are you seeing this kind of attitude of leverage and playfulness and fluency, or is it very much stand back and watch?
No, some of it's still a little transactional. It's very, the ideation that creates an image that sort of convinces a customer.
We use this tool for that.
Yeah. So I was talking with an architect, and I think it was at AU, and they're winning work by doing simple sketches or massing models of lobby atrium spaces, and then they're asking, I think it's Midjourney, they're describing a text prompt, and then in the style of a particular well-known architecture
firm,
using
that
and
underlay.
They're using that to generate an image, and then they're using those images to win work, and then they execute the work. But they're naming other firms by name, which might, I don't know, it might upset some people, but to me, it's no different than going to the library and pulling out the latest architectural record or some other magazine and going, oh, I like that work. That's by this
Putting
firm.
a little tab on that one.
Yeah, and just go, it's that firm. Because if you
this
say
is what
that
Pinterest was
firm,
for everybody. Like it's just create all these Pinterest boards.
So it's part of their text prompt. So
stairs and
it's
rails.
Still a little transactional, I think, in that way of going, here's the massing model and we want it in the style of this. And you get an image. But the idea, if you're doing lunch and learns on AI and you have young staff, asking people, what are you using AI firm for? Let's go around the table with a lunch and learn and talk about what you're using AI firm, but has nothing to do directly with architecture.
No one's going to get in trouble here.
Right.
Just an open conversation.
And it might not be anything to do with images, but the idea of someone saying, oh, I'm using AI to have conversations that are in lieu of a psychologist, or I'm having a discussion in lieu of trying to understand a difficult relationship with a coworker or a roommate. All of these kinds of human conflicts. Imagine a roommate that just doesn't keep the apartment clean to your standard.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, I use Chat GPT Plus
to help me formulate that conversation.
Yeah, right. Because
give me some pointers.
Artists may not be. We're kind of conflict averse.
Yeah.
Yeah, we don't like chasing money. We don't like chasing arguments. That's why
selling.
We have somebody else do that.
Selling.
We don't like selling.
Right.
So now you have that conversation with an agent to help you frame a discussion around why it's important for me that you do your dishes and do your part to keep the apartment clean. Like, just go around the room and find out what young people are using, I don't know, young people, but the people that are younger in the firm, what are they using these tools to do that you might not expect? And I think you'll come up with an idea that will fold itself into something business related to solve a problem. But it's not, I wouldn't just say, okay, how are we going to use this to build better buildings, right?
Yeah.
You might want to take a bigger, step back and look at the big picture.
That's a different conversation. That's like, here's the business goals. Once you've defined those, you can figure out which technology it may be AI, it may not be, right? Plugs into solving that business goal, right? That could be any number of tools to do that. You're talking about approaching it from more of a grassroots effort.
Yeah, just like, hey, what obscure things are you using this for?
And that'll just spark ideas, right?
Yep. Yeah, I think you take a bigger picture. You don't just step back and going, how are we going to use this for rendering? It's kind of, that's so transactional. You could do much bigger things with it. And then you might get to rendering as well.
Well, I want to use this now as a segue to transition into the upcoming roundtable discussions that you're going to be hosting
end of April.
At the end of April of 2025.
So this will be the second year. And we have the fall leadership retreat, which is more leadership, self-leadership, other leadership of others. And then the spring event is more technology focused. So this will be the second year. And our approach is that good answers are not transactional. They come from discussions. And both Adam and I have experienced watching really good presenters at conferences present something, and then you get them after the conference. You go, okay, so look, here's the thing on my project.
Let me add my me context.
Yeah, how would you do it for this kind of thing? And they go, oh yeah, that won't work. Yeah, you probably want to do it this other way. So we thought, you know what, we should just have the conversations after the presentation. So like Carl Storms did a presentation last year that was based on his self-interest in he did 100 days of AI. And we went around the table what other people were using AI for, in some cases, trivial kind of things. I learned things that never realized that even could exist.
See, this is exactly the conversation we just had about finding out what young people are doing with AI, like flexing that muscle. And so Carl did that for 100 days. Yeah. Kevin Kelly, one of the early internet pioneers, Midjourney every single day would just to play with it, just to figure out what it could do, to find out what worked, find out what didn't work. And that to me is really about like kind of flexing this muscle and just playing with it. Like there's nothing on the line here, right?
No, and it's not, and we're all high performing technologists. So we're not really concerned about someone coming up with an idea and then shooting it full of arrows. Well, that's not going to work. What we really want is, this is a hard problem and it's costing me stress and time and money. Mm-hmm. How are you guys approaching this? Because they're not presentations, they're discussions, and we just go around the table, and then eventually the discussions go back and forth and from different angles. and talk about a number of business related topics. Harlan Brum, who's a product manager for Revit, led a discussion or facilitated a discussion on the future of documentation. And we all realize it's a really hard problem. You just can't. And maybe what we're also trying to do is automate an inefficient process. And maybe that's not the best thing to do. So one of the submissions this year, and I expect he's going to come along, is a guy named Scott Brown, who's the national BIM manager for Beck. And Beck is a design build firm. And Scott showed me a documentation method at Autodesk University in a trivial way. We were just at dinner and he opened his iPad like, "Hey, Scott, what's interesting?" He's like, "Well, I'm working on this thing. You want to see this thing?" And I dreamt about the conversation we had at dinner that night. And I was going, "Well, Scott, how would you do this? And what about that?" And we were still having the conversation. So he must have really got into my head a bit. And I said, "Scott, this is profound. I think you should present this one evening at the roundtable event and just show a room of 30 or 40 technologists. This is how I'm doing documentation. And we have to," and by we, I mean Beck. Beck has to be accountable from the design through the implementation of the construction. And he's like, "Oh yeah, I'll do that." Paint a target on his chest and present it in front of a bunch of high performing technology directors.
But what's so cool about these events is like you can totally be safe and vulnerable and and it really isn't a target, right? It's like if it was at AU and you were presenting that, it's a different environment.
Like Autodesk University is a very kind of it's a very lecture environment where hold your questions to the end or maybe ask questions as you go along.
But there's also a spotlight and a stage and a screen and a PowerPoint and a video. And
there's a power hierarchy,
stakes.
Right?
Yeah.
There's an adult-child kind of relationship. I am the speaker and you are the listener. And so you don't want to ask questions that might put the speaker on the spot.
Yeah.
What Scott showed me was a sit back, drop my napkin, gobsmacked moment going, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe that works." And it's, and without, I don't want to give it away because I want Scott to really present this, but it is a return to first practices using new technology. And, I would say it orders of magnitude simplifies the process of creating instructions to build buildings.
Interesting.
And
these are not recorded and they're not shared afterward. Like you have to.
You got to be there.
You got to be there.
Yeah, and we think that's important. We've had people ask, "Oh, will these be recorded? Can I download it later?" And I think that's just, it's not worth the investment. That's just so transactional. You really want to be there to interact and to understand at the moment. And I think if Scott goes forward with this and opens it up and shows people what he's doing, he's going to end up creating a template that people will be able to use to document their projects. And this is in Revit terms of, the word template, like project template. I think this template will scale to a residence all the way up to the largest, most complex projects in the world.
Wow.
And it enormously simplifies the documentation process. And because I think it's part of the artifact is because the reason this has evolved is because Beck is accountable from the design through the construction. So he's trying to simplify the communication process as well. So I think what we've used technology for was to create a more efficient way of making drawings, which has resulted in this incredibly complex method of naming and enumerating sheets and where the sheets go in the set and, hundreds and hundreds of sheets of drawings for not complex buildings, but it's an artifact of how drawings have evolved. And Scott's just gone right back to first practices.
With politics, with country, there's so much else kind of muddying that, right? Making it what it's become.
Yeah. So what he did, it just so surprised me. And even the name, the name or the metaphor he's come up for this process is even beautiful as well.
Nice.
So good on you, Scott. Yeah, he's a curious guy. So that's what we'll do. We'll have the same kind of. You went to the leadership retreat, so you'll know it'll be the same. We intend to have the same kind of process where people arrive Sunday, try to start to detach, get in the moment of talking, catching up with people, and then Monday will be the offsite event. Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, roundtable best practice discussions, 9 a.m., 10:30 a.m., 1 p.m. from 2:30 until 5 o'clock. Afternoon's open. So go down to the lake, learn how to e-foil. We'll have the ski boats out, go for a paddleboard and, or talk with, fellow peers, ask questions, end up having a discussion about something you didn't think you were going to have a discussion about that turns out to be really important. And then we'll probably have an evening. So dinner is usually 6 and then 7 o'clock, kind of just have it's all informal, but have an informal discussion about an idea. And that's where I would like Scott to present this. Because I think it's going to take a longer discussion. We don't want to be constrained by, okay, this is the 9
we got to do this next thing.
10:30 a.m.
Yeah, no,
thing.
it's just
like, wow, okay, let's talk about
see
it.
where this goes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, now we're going to go out to the fire. We're going to go out to the campfire out by the lake, and we'll keep talking about it, after he's had. So we don't have PowerPoint presentations, but I think for this, we might end up having a projector and a screen.
So you can
or
show
a TV and a big
to look
big
at.
TV and a screen. And Scott goes, so that's what I've been thinking about. So the other thing about the event is I don't know if Adam and I have been too clever about this, but we got excited about the idea of theming the event, and we're looking for submissions of facilitated discussions around the theme of better storytelling through technology. But I don't know if that's. And Adam and I are going to talk about it again this week. Have we constrained it too much or put a form around it that people go, I don't know if my idea about this topic or discussion is really about better storytelling. Maybe I shouldn't submit it. So maybe we need to pull back from that and go, no. If you have something that you want to discuss with a room of other, best practice leaders and people who think deeply about the technology and how it's implemented about any topic that is important.
Curiosities.
It's curiosity. Then you should submit that topic.
I mean, the thing about
get it out there.
This audience, I think, is that they are the people who tinker, right? We tinker with stuff because we build tools. We design things. Like you chase your curiosities. In the 90s, it was like everybody learned how to code a website by hand, right? And there was you couldn't do a course back then. It was like,
you just had to figure it out.
You view source and you copy and paste and you would figure it out, right?
Right.
But there's new versions of that, like what you're saying Scott's doing, right? It was like something led to something else and it led him down this path. And I'm sure he never saw that coming, but everybody's got something. Everybody has that story. And it's like, what's the current version of that story for you? Do you think a group of 20 to 40 people would be the right audience for you to throw it out there and then see what comes back? Like, to me, it is not transactional. It's not that one way. Here's my idea. Take forth and go forth and prosper. It's not that. It's like, oh, well, what about this? Oh, have you thought about it like this? And you're going to get out of it probably more than you even put into it. Right. And so there's, so like labeling it under the idea of storytelling, people may not think that they have a good enough story. But everybody definitely has a story.
Like if we said better communication through technology, because sometimes as technologists, we get excited about the artifact of the technology and really what is the implication of it or how do you use it well? You can use technology to do lazy things, right? But what I think Scott has done, and I could even be in my own bubble right now, because I tend not to get surprised a lot. I think I got surprised at Revit. I got surprised at SketchUp. I got surprised at Enscape. I got surprised at cars that drive themselves, right? That's over a 20-year period, like 4 or 5 things surprised me technology wise. Oh, and I saw what Scott was working on. I'm like, this is beautiful. And I really want him to show this to a group of 30, 40 people and just have them go, oh my gosh, like, could we do this? Could we do that? And that could be a spark that I think does profoundly improve the process of creating instructions to build buildings.
Cool.
Yeah. He's a great guy. Yeah. So if anyone's out there, that the topic is better storytelling through technology, or that's the theme. Yeah. If we've been too clever about that, just ignore it and just propose a really great discussion.
Yeah.
Something that's led by your curiosity.
And what's the, there's a date coming up, but how does it work with proposing these?
I think, so you have to have a date, a deadline somewhere. So we're looking around the 27th of December is the deadline for submissions. And then registration will start the first week of January. There's only over 3 days. It's 9 to 12 discussion sessions.
Yeah.
So we can go through those pretty quickly. We don't have to create a big committee. It'll be Adam, me, and maybe a couple others, just go through them and discuss them and pick them. And then open up registration probably first week of January. And then the event, I believe, is the 27th of April through the 2nd of May, Sunday to Friday.
Right.
Yeah.
Cool.
That gets everybody on site for the offsite Monday. Otherwise, you can't show up Monday. We're already gone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
To me, this is an event where like it really is worth investing in yourself in, even if you can't get corporate to pay for it, or I don't know, like coming away from this is the best event in AEC that I've ever attended. And so I'm not just saying that because I'm sitting here with you in Denver airport face to face. It really is. I mean, it was super, super impactful. And so I feel like it's worth submitting an idea, but it's also worth just attending.
In practical terms, the reason we announced the call for submission topics or session topics after Autodesk University is because the dust has finally settled for people they've got to get to AU. And it also gives people, I'll give credit to Nick Kramer. He said, you need to tell people how much this is going to cost and when it's going to be in the third quarter or fourth quarter I'm like, why? He goes, well, we have to ask for budget. And it never occurred to me, I'm my own business owner, and Adam and I have a lot of leeway with what we do. Not everybody gets to do that. So they have to ask for budget and planning before the end of the year. Don't surprise them in January or February and say, oh, we're having this event, you should come. Because then they've got to ask for budget they didn't ask for, and it looks like they don't know how to plan their time and money.
Yeah.
So that's why we put it out this fall. And actually, we've announced the dates for both events. The spring event's the end of April, and the fall event, the Leadership Retreat, will be the end of October. We're going to get out of the hurricane path for a change.
That's right.
And stop doing it at the end of September.
Because it is in Florida.
Yeah. And if you look at the bell curve of when hurricanes, rough weather happens in Florida, it's all right at the second half of September.
And people who don't know hurricane weather like me or, others from Canada and, the West Coast.
We had 2 hurricanes this year.
Everybody was worried.
The week before and the week after the event, we had hurricanes pass. We didn't get impacted, but it was just like, okay, it messes with travel. And I thought there was
a lot of worry about it.
Oh yeah, it creates stress.
Should I even go? Because
yeah. No, we were going to go on the Chetuckney Springs, and it turned out that the river ended up full of trees, and so we ended up going to Silver Springs, and that was the Thursday or the Wednesday before the event.
Right.
That river's still not clear.
Months later.
Months later, they're having to pull trees out of it. So we'll do that event at the end of at the end of October for the fall event and stay out of the storm, the peak of the bell curve.
Yeah, but it's an amazing location.
Yeah.
It's really quiet. You actually can unplug. The Wi-Fi is not great.
It's good enough.
Which is fine, which is actually, I think, a bonus because then you're less distracted and you're more grounded, I think, in the people and in the place of the event. So all of that, I think, adds up to.
We haven't figured out how to make this, if we should scale it. Like, I don't think more than the number of people that fit on one motor coach should ever attend, because we don't want the artifact of having to print lanyards and having to, like, we don't have exhibitors, we don't have lanyards, we don't have sponsors. I don't want to turn into the event location and say brought to you by XYZ software company.
Yeah.
Just like the moment you get there, you're there. Everything is authentic. So from the standpoint of it scaling as a money-making hand over fist money-making venture, I don't think we aspire to that, or we've even figured that out. We would like to, I would like to try to take this concept of technical roundtable and 6 months later leadership roundtable and go to the other hemisphere, like try to do Australia or New Zealand or somewhere else. But again, no more than 50 people.
But people from the Southern Hemisphere come to this event too.
Yeah, that's right.
It's a stretch, but they do it.
No, Carrie Thompson attended.
Right. Callum.
Callum Freeman from Assemble in New Zealand attended. And they're both they're like, hey, we should do this in New Zealand or Australia. And like, yeah, we have to find a place. But we have an interesting Venn diagram at the camp that we go to, because we have a private chef. We have a commercial kitchen. He gets to run the kitchen for the week. So we have, I think meals are very important. Conversations that happen around meals are important. Chef Charles has just a joyful attitude to what he does. And so having a legitimate French chef
Think about the food that you're consuming and who it was made by at this versus
And it's
a production factory.
Yeah,
food
you're not
making
standing
thing.
in a line
Right.
getting your food. He brings it out. It's all
So it's
set
different
like
energy.
a family. Like here's your platters of food and a
Right.
couple of
He
tables.
explains it all.
Yep. So that kind of attention to detail, and it's a camp, so the accommodations are, I would say, austere. They're not uncomfortable, but it's either like a motel style room or a cabin style room where it's, there's no campers. It's just you're in the counselor's
I'll tell you
accommodation.
some questions that came up from, so some people heard that I went, I think I was at AU, and they're like, you went to that, right? And I said, yeah. And they said, is it true that you can bring your family? Is it true? Because they heard that on the podcast. And they said, is that true? Like you
Could you really do that?
were just making that up. So talk about that part of it.
Yeah. So the idea is that we wanted to have counselor-led activities for kids during the day, and then in the afternoons everybody can get together. Sylvia, who's a wonderful technologist around BIM scanning services, modeling services of historic buildings. Mia came, and I think Mia's 7, very precocious, self-motivated, and she was great the whole week. And it worked.
Yeah.
So she was a little bit nervous about attending at first, like she was going to be the only kid. She's already said, Dad, I want to go back next year. And so we're trying to do it in such a way where, people bring their kids, they're doing nature things during the day. They don't have
to sit in the conference room.
No.
I mean, it's not even
no.
really a conference room.
Yeah, Mia's in edge conditions. She'll sit in a conference room and listen to discussions and draw and color all week. And but no, it should be like, kids want to go off and the things they do is like teach kids to build fires or build forts or the kinds of stuff that I used to do growing up in Florida. Yeah, you go feral and you go build a fort in the woods. So the idea is that they counselor-led activities during the day for kids, and it's just a nominal cost for the meals. It's not, much more at all.
There's other opportunities for like offsite, things that can happen.
Oh yeah, they can take
depending on who shows up.
Yeah, if you had partners show up and they want to go off, there's an enormity of interesting, historic, and beautiful things in Florida to do.
Right.
Go off to St. Augustine for the day and go shopping, or old historic village. But it's legitimately like we had someone asking about driving. They wanted to bring the whole family. I think it was like 3 kids, mom and dad. I'm like, yeah, go. Mom and dad are both architects, and they just wanted to know that they could legitimately bring the family. Yeah.
Yeah.
We just haven't been. It's just that kind of new thing where no one's really done it because it's not been done. I don't know that people bring their families to AU. I don't even think you can get into the conference area at AU under a certain age. You have to be like 18 or older.
Probably. Yeah.
We had families that built because it was just kind of a easy, relaxed atmosphere, and people would bring their families. But yeah, definitely at Lake Swan, you could bring families and the kids could go on a paddleboard, do counselor-led activities, and then
go out on the inner tube behind the boat.
Yeah,
go down the water slide.
Yeah, the wrap-up video that Peter did shows Sylvia and Mia on the getting pulled around on the big inflatable thing. Yeah. So it's meant to be time to definitely think hard, but also relax, try to disconnect a little bit. It should be an investment in future revenue. But I think the best way to get there is by having conversations, not by sitting in a room and just being fed presentations all the time in a transactional way.
And I think it's, again, this is one of those things.
And you can have both. I'm not saying the other one, like the Autodesk University kind of approach where you do have sort of audience and presenter kind of format. That's legitimate.
This is very participatory and contributory, right? And in the just the natural way that it works. And to me, like, again, just reinforcing, it was impactful. It was professionally impactful. It was personally impactful. I built relationships with people who I'd never met before there. There's a network, because it's intentionally small, that gets built up. And I can see this being kind of a homecoming event that happens, but there's room for new people. I mean, it's not exclusive.
No, and so, it's not a country club.
Yeah.
But it's, I think authentic, having the offsite on Monday helps people to deposture a bit.
Yeah.
And kind of just
get to know each other.
Detach and have conversations that aren't.
You ease into it.
Yeah.
This is lovely.
We thought about doing it at the end, like it as a wrap-up event. Oh, okay, we've all done this thing for the week. Now let's do an offsite. And I think it was Henry, give him credit with this idea of deposturing and doing it at the beginning to help people kind of relax and feel more open and feel authentic, and then go into the event. And that's proved itself out.
Yeah.
A better structure.
All right. Well, Phil, I will endeavor to get this episode out before your deadline.
27th of December. Look, I think the main thing is people now, if they have to ask for budget to do it, and what do they want to attend, and what do they want to events do they want to contribute to next year? Now, at least it could be, they have advanced knowledge, which we, to our detriment, we haven't done that in the past. We should have. So now we're letting people know, and we're letting people know in Q4 instead of Q1.
Cool.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Thanks, Evan.
Well, it's going to be fun. And I wish you the best, because I won't be able to attend that one, but
the spring event, you can't. You've got obligations. But maybe in the fall, get you back on the eFoil.
Yeah.
That's Evan doing the lasso. Was that you in the wrap up video? And you'd never done that before.
Nope.
No, and you got up.
It was cool.
Yeah. Oh, great. Thanks, Evan.
All right.
All right, buddy.
Talk to you next time.